Whilst the Cold War with the Xi'an intensified in the east, to the west, new discoveries held incredible opportunities. Idris IV, now commonly known as Lok, is the most infamous planet within the Idris system. It was discovered by the vessel Ikaroa, first terraformed in 2533. It has a long and storied history. At the time, when humanity was rapidly expanding into the universe, Idris IV had a bright future. The UPE certified it as a recommended growth centre later that year, leading to a surge in its population. However, 8 years later, rather than meeting its growth potential, Idris IV became a battleground for humanity's first interspecies war. System Assessment, 15th November 2541. On Elysium 4, there is an indigenous species calling themselves the Tavarin. Though sentient and intelligent, they have not evolved to our level technologically. Recommend that we establish contact and bring them into the UPE. It is a wonderful opportunity to elevate the species into the modern era. They were not interested in talking. They had begun to venture out into the universe from their homeland, Kaleeth, and already had control over several systems. All they wanted was our territory to add to the list of real estate. Driven by the desire for human resources and the glory earned through battle, they decided to strike. They struck first. With a level of endurance that one had to admire, the battle raged on for 4 years. The First Tavarin War had begun. When the Tavarin first invaded the system in 2542, Idris IV was heavily impacted by a series of orbital bombardments. So intense were these attacks that most of the population fled to the Korsti Mountains, to a town called Tanis. It quickly became a base camp for the few hundred civilians that remained. These brave civilians went on to be known as the Greys and have been attributed as the driving factor behind the groundside intelligence provided throughout the operation to nullify the attacks. The Greys were led by Rachel Locke, a local with no military training. Her role was pivotal, leading a number of strikes to disrupt the Tavarin occupiers. So important was Locke's role that after the war, the Governor's Council named Idris IV after the brave freedom fighter. The Greys also went on to be remembered through the naming of the only landing zone in the town of Tanis, Grey Zone. The Battle of Idris IV, October 1st, 2544, Standard Earth Time. The battle that changed humanity. The Tavarin War had raged into its second year. Although the United Planets of Earth had managed to claim some decisive victories, the Tavarin were unrelenting, gaining ground in Centauri system and pushing UPE forces as far back as Ferran's system. By late August 2544 Standard Earth Time, High General Trevor Borland had grown impatient. In a strategy meeting with his advisors, he expressed a fear that by letting the battle lines equalise, he could see both sides becoming complacent and settling into a war of attrition. He wanted to unbalance the Tavarin, to challenge their expectations of how we had been engaging them in warfare. Over the next week, Borland, High Command and his advisors sketched out the skeletal framework of what would become Operation Nemesis. Military intelligence had identified a Tavarin shipyard on the surface of Idris IV that served as the main repair facility and launching point for a majority of the Tavarin fighters in the system, as well as the operational hub for several unknown Tavarin structures that they were building around the globe. Nemesis intended to seize and occupy this territory, to act as a forward operating position to gain a foothold back into Idris. The UPE military's Research and Development Department had accelerated production on their new R-27HE hull shredder torpedoes, and by September 17th they had them combat ready for the mission. Naval forces assembled by the Farron jump point, while Army and Marine ground units trained relentlessly, using the then untested planetary invasion techniques. Operation Nemesis was a daring and divisive plan. Upon entry into Idris, the initial invasion wave of carriers, destroyers, corvettes and transports were to ignore all Tavarin cap ships and push into the system, attempting to drag the Tavarin into a fight above Idris 4. Specified ships would break off along the way to form a defensive line between the target and the Farron jump point. Army and Marine ships would invade the planet's surface, seize military control points and hold until a steady stream of reinforcements could enter the system to back up the defensive line and reconnect to the initial wave who were in orbit besieging the planet. The operation officially launched at 13:45, September 30th, 2544 Standard Earth Time. Enemy contact occurred immediately after entering Idris. Customized missile ships entered the jump point first, launching a full spread of rockets before the rest of the fleet arrived. The initial wave commenced its push towards Idris 4. The Tavarin capital ships tried to intercept and engage the UPE Navy, but the fleet maintained course and sped towards Idris 4. Finally, once the Navy and Marines deployed to the planet, the Navy turned to fight. The battle above Idris 4 began in earnest as fighters swarmed up from the surface. 3 transports were lost during descent before the fighting spilled over onto the ground. The 112th Infantry Battalion, Army, under Colonel Tio Koshi, assaulted the shipyard designated the Hill, along with Alpha, Bravo and Charlie, mechanised companies on loan from the 3rd Expeditionary Unit as support. After 6 hours of combat, the 112th and the Marines took the Hill. For the moment, it seemed like the operation was going to be a resounding success. Then, the moment passed. The Tavarin unleashed a devastating strike against the fleet in orbit above Idris 4. The structures that the Tavarin were building turned out to be a prototype planetary defence system. 2 carriers were annihilated in seconds. The remaining UPE ships scattered to avoid the fire from the planet. Even worse, the new hull shredder torpedoes began to fail, either exploding in their tubes or failing to arm when fired. On the surface, the Tavarin forces that had abandoned the Hill returned with renewed vigour. Hearing reports from the ships, the 112th realised that they were going to be on their own very soon. Their mechanised escort was already down 50% of their original numbers. The soldiers were nowhere near as familiar with the Tavarin installation as their enemies, and were having difficulty securing it. The next planetary rotation would last a lifetime. The naval vessels battled wave after wave of Tavarin fighters above Idris 4, refusing to give an inch, knowing that any space lost would certainly consign the troops below to a certain death sentence. The 112th suffered a devastating loss when a Tavarin fighter strafed the compound, dropping an antimatter bomb that destroyed Colonel Koshi and his command staff. The ground forces became scattered, demoralised, and the Tavarin seemed to pick up on it. The last remnants of 3rd EU Bravo Company died in the push. The remaining Marines and the 112th fell back to their inner defensive position. Major Michael Calori of the 112th Battalion. Charlie Company was trying to orchestrate an extraction plan when an unseen sniper's bullet took his life. His second in command, a young ambitious officer, Captain Ivor Messer, then assumed command of the company. Messer began calling danger-close bombing runs from the fleet's Retaliator bombers while he organised ambush points with the surviving soldiers. For hours, the bombers dumped payload after payload of high-explosive ordnance on the converging Tavarin forces. Messer didn't stop there, also organising a small recon force to destroy the planetary defence system that was still devastating the fleet above. The group commandeered a downed Tavarin skiff and slipped past the lines. The infiltration team, led by Sergeant Adam Core, managed to not only discover the nexus of the planetary defence system, but overtake and assume control of it. They turned the devastating weapon against the massing Tavarin fleet long enough for UPE naval reinforcements to enter the system. The Battle of Idris IV had taken another turn. Over the next few hours, the Tavarin forces began to fall back. Unfortunately, Core and his team had to abandon and detonate the defence system before reinforcements arrived. As the smoke cleared on Idris IV, over 100 capital ships, thousands of fighters, and 70,000 lives had been lost on both sides. Messer and his forces still held the hill. His actions had decisively turned the tide of the battle. The victory at Idris IV would galvanise the populace in the UPE, drive recruitment rates up, and build on the momentum to push further into the Tavarin systems. At the centre of all this, the young, ambitious Captain Ivan Messer, whose taste of power would begin to push him on a path that would change the course of human history in a very different way. Shortly after the end of the war, Ivan Messer's popularity soars and helped promote him to High Commander, but his ambition does not stop there. Whilst in post, he is openly critical about the current governance system and begins advocating for the creation of a single office with the title of Prime Citizen. Whilst this is ongoing, across the universe, unrest continues to grow, and Messer continues to be a public figure in keeping civilians positive during this time. In 2546, speaking at a memorial for the victims of a terrorist attack in the Davian system, Messer used this opportunity to also further his political agenda. The systems are falling apart. Since the war ended, we are under attack from a new kind of threat, one that is not fought on battlefields or between carriers. That was the message 8 months ago. 6 terrorist attacks over the previous year had shaken everybody from the notion that the Tavarin defeat was going to lead to peace. People wanted answers, but more importantly, they wanted to feel like the tribunal was getting control. They got neither. The advocacy never caught the perpetrators. They only knew that the bombs had been made in part from Xi'an technology. Meanwhile, the tribunal debated a course of action to the point of inaction. So, the systems were falling apart. Humanity needed a leader. The solution? Elect a new position, Prime Citizen. To be a single voice, the deciding vote in an overwrought government. Citizens from all over the systems began to run for this new office. Every week, it seemed a new candidate would appear, making the same promises. This went on for months. As the election drew near, High General Messer put his name forward as a candidate. He spoke last night at a commemoration ceremony for the victims of the 4th terrorist attack. Alyssa Jamali, a poli-sci student, dictated a summary of Messer's speech. People, citizens, I come to you today as a believer. I believe that we have a great and vibrant history. I believe that there are so many more wonderful things to discover. I believe in humanity. But there are enemies that want to cut us down, that resent our ascension, that want us to fall back from the stars. The vicious attacks on our systems are just the beginning. As a soldier who has stared into the horror of war, I don't say this lightly. We have to protect ourselves, protect our families, protect our future, protect our ability to claim what is rightfully ours. I don't want another war. Too many sons and daughters, husbands and wives have already been lost in the deep vacuum and barren planets. But I will say this. I would ring every system and every jump point with shields and wire 1,000 kilometers thick if it meant we wouldn't have to lose any more. I have always been a soldier of humanity. Give me this chance to keep you safe, to keep the threats and violence of species not as civilized as us far away. We can take our rightful place in the galaxy. Believe in me, like I believe in you. Believe in humanity. High General Messer speaks with a conviction that makes him easy to believe. In short, I think he's right. There is an inherent problem with 3 equal divisions of power. While it is preferable to have that discourse in times of peace, we are living in a dangerous time. Decisions sometimes must be made quickly and effectively. I know this sounds like the first step towards absolutism, but the system is still in place. The method that they are suggesting still maintains the High Secretary, General and Advocate, and even the Senate, but they all advise the Prime Citizen. Who then makes the ultimate decision? Like High General Messer said after introducing the Prime Citizen motion, every ship needs a captain. Messer was indeed the one chosen as the first Prime Citizen. He quickly began using his role to restructure the UPE into the United Empire of Earth. Anointing himself as the head of state and head of government, he became the Imperator. And so began an age of unprecedented expansions and colonization. Together, we will improve and expand mankind ever outwards towards the endless gold horizon. This line inspired what has become known as one of the biggest catalysts for our aggressive expansion into the galaxy over the coming century. Gold Horizon was a mining prospecting corporation founded in 2550. Their intentions were to take advantage of lucrative tax breaks for asteroid mining. They were documented to have made the discovery of the Grakneth lode, a high concentration of titanium-bearing asteroids in the outlands of the Terra system, which vastly increased their prospects and aided them in establishing their role as an industrial powerhouse. They firmly laid their stake to our voyage into the stars. Once a new star system had been surveyed, they were able to produce prefabricated mining stations, complete with drilling rigs, storage, and spatial defense perimeters for quick deployment. This would negate the lengthy timeframe between survey and the commencement of work other companies faced, and reduce the ability for other jumpers to make a claim to these discoveries. 2 decades into their operations, Gold Horizon saw a gap in the market. The economy was heavily geared towards the expansion of more terraforming projects, and Gold Horizon shifted their focus accordingly. They now focus primarily on planetary transformation support, and were known for their Gold Horizon space station, the distinctive ring-shaped platform deployed around the galaxy. These stations were incredible. A home away from home to house terraforming workers, their equipment, and their support systems. Included in the mix was dedicated entertainment arenas, medical bays, and also living quarters. Some question the legitimacy of Gold Horizon's success. It seemed they were always one step ahead of everyone else. With heavy support from an array of politicians, they were first in line for many of the government contracts handed out, and were also able to secure lucrative private deals, with some questioning whether bribery had a role in this. It seemed Gold Horizon had it all. That was until 2650, when CEO and majority shareholder Denis Acevedo made a single fateful decision: move the corporation's headquarters to Terra.